You're listening to A Glimpse Inside on the Super Power Up Network, the show that affirms for people there is more to life, and it is possible to be happy, inspired, successful, joyous, and free. Welcome. This is A Glimpse Inside. I'm Wendy Perrotti, and today we are beginning our 4-part relationship rescue series with some relationship advice from the trenches. I'm here today with Paula Jean, the creative genius and founder of PURPOSEworks, a company focused on creating tools and resources for those seeking a journey of self-discovery, self-expression, and legacy creation. She's the author of Purpose Pages, an absolutely gorgeous interactive journal. In 2017, Paula Jean opened Rock Paper Sistas, a name that I absolutely love, an artisan gallery located on the iconic green in Guilford, Connecticut, where her own art is also on display. As is always the case in our series opener, I know this girl in real life. So many of our conversations end up being about relationships, and so I thought it would be really fun to kick off this series with us sharing some of our personal experiences with us for you with you today. So I kind of want us to shine a light on where things go wrong for all of us in relationships and what you can do to make even the most challenging moments better. Hello, Paula Jean.
Hello, girl.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm tickled to be here with you today.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I want to start with a broad stroke. You're all about purpose and legacy creation. Where do you see the ties between that and relationships?
Yeah, good thought to ponder, right? So we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it, but did you realize that most of us, when we hit that middle-age time frame in our lives, have no legacy, have not thought about legacy planning? And I'm not talking about the financial kind, because most of us do that at some point in time. We either have companies that have 401ks that are doing that for us, or we squirrel money away. I'm talking about that legacy of who you are. What defines and how are you defined? How are people going to remember you? And we haven't thought about it, and we haven't taken any action on it. And I will tell you and share with you that it was riveting when I realized that in my own life, and that it's not that difficult and it's not that big of a stretch to begin to create and to think about the legacy you want to leave when we're no longer here. But it's completely tied to relationships. See, in order for us to survive as humans on this little planet Earth, in order for us to thrive, we've got to have connection. And therein lies the secret sauce to creating legacy.
You know, I could not agree with you more. And I know we've talked a little bit about this in a couple of different ways over the years that we've been friends. That piece about legacy, you know, how we show up in life, I think we're wired, obviously we're wired to be working on this sort of default mode, right? The things that we do over and over, the repetition in our lives sort of builds on itself, and we create those neural pathways that keep us moving in the same direction, and we don't realize that we're operating in default. We don't realize that we're not showing up as who we think we are, right? Our behaviors are often not in line with what our value is, what our missions are. And not because we're doing anything wrong, just because we're in the business of going about our lives in a day-to-day way. And the moment I think that you start to understand, how am I showing up every day? How am I with my kids? How am I with my colleagues? How am I with my boss? How am I when I go get a coffee at Starbucks, right? How am I showing up in my day-to-day life? We start to get intentional about that piece. And I think it affects not just our relationships, but this thing that you're calling legacy.
Absolutely. And part of that stems from or sits in our very transactional world. We're very transactionally driven. What can I do to get something? How can I do this to get that? How can I show up to gain something? And when that paradigm is shifted, it's a game changer. Unfortunately, most of the time that shift occurs around a real pain point, something that causes us to pause, and I mean pause hard. Whether it's a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job, it usually revolves around a loss or a pain point because we are living transactionally. And I never really quite understood that until I reached that pivot, that pain point, and I caught myself being very transactional. Everything that I was doing was for the moment gain, and everything else was someday we'll do that, someday we'll go here. And I realized that some days don't happen. That the moments that we create, it's the moments that you live wholeheartedly, as Brene Brown says, all in, that create the breadcrumbs and the string of memories that are really what's most coveted and most precious at the end of our days. So how you live those moments ties to how you thrive, which is relationship. And that when you start to see it that way, then you can start to see that those little moments are the precious thing. And that time that you take to be kind to someone or to really have a conversation and look eyeball to eyeball, those are the pieces that will create the legacy that you are going to cherish as you mature and age in life. Because let's face it, we're not taking any of this shit with us.
Right on, sister.
We're not.
My mother, it's funny that you say transactional. My mother always used to say, you're only as good as your last performance. And I think that for me, it made that performance, that transaction, so critical, right? It was good or it was bad. And that informed what I would do next. I would sort of rest on my laurels, or I would try to make it better, right? Fix the thing that I thought that I had done poorly. And I think that for so many people, it creates that sort of yo-yo living, right? Between I did a good thing, I did a bad thing. He's good, he's bad, she's good, she's bad. When in fact, if we were to zoom out and look at our life in the long term, over the whole thing, we see that all of those things meld into one life. They're fluid. They don't actually exist as separate interactions in our life. And yet we measure ourselves and other people based on those separate interactions, based on their most recent performance. And I think that's where our relationships can get really muddy.
Absolutely. And the other side of that being so micro focused is something that I experienced, which was I glossed over. I called myself at one point in time a professional plate spinner because I had checked out of the equation, and I just knew that I had to keep all the balls, if you will. So I had a corporate job to keep that plate spinning, if you will, if you think of that that image. And then I have kids, so I'm spinning that plate. Now the job requires more time, go back to the plate with the job, and on and on and on. So what it did was it took me out of the equation. There was no focus on me. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to think about it. Well, that's all well and grand until you go out with your girlfriends and you sit down to have a glass of wine, and the waitress comes around and she says, "And what will you have?" I don't know. I'll have what she's having. I had taken myself out of the act of living, basically. I was just kind of skimming along. And when you skim along in life, the nuggets, the things that are most brilliant and beautiful get skimmed along and skimmed over as well. And it wasn't until I came across a Rumi quote that caused me to pause on that. And Rumi says, "And you, when will you begin that long journey into yourself?" And I thought, aha, being a professional plate spinner serves everybody else, but it doesn't serve me. And I don't have those deep, rich relationships. I have the ones that are kind of at an arm's length out there.
Right.
That
Because
didn't feel good.
in
That didn't
fact,
feel good.
that plate spinning, when it eats up your sense of self, right? When you lose yourself in that, we feel like we're really serving relationships, but we're really only doing that superficially, right? They're not getting the full version of us, and we're not able to engage fully in our relationships when we're operating in that, as you said, transactional way, right? And it interferes with it buries our sense of purpose, right? To your point, it eliminates our opportunity to create a legacy. We're not aware of how we're showing up, and it makes our relationships anything from bland to outright superficial or contentious, depending on what's going on in those relationships.
Absolutely. And you can only give what you have. We've all heard that. I lived it, so I know that it's true. I was everybody else's best friend,
Hmm.
never asking for what I would need. And that is a false relationship.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve either side of that relationship. You can give and you can give, but that other person was missing the opportunity to also give back to me. So my relationships kind of stayed at a plateau. There's only so much.
Okay. You know what? I was not even going to ask that question, but I'm going to make that the first question when we come back, because that's critical. We think about relationships as giving and getting, and that's transactional. But our ability to receive as well as offer, right? There's a nuanced difference there. And I think especially for women, we suck at receiving.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how to do it well. And so we give and give and give more, and it affects our sense of self-worth, and it certainly affects our relationships. So we're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, I'd love to start with that question, and then we'll dig into some more of our stories. So we've been talking with Paula Jean Burns about her work on purpose. Actually, I like that. Her work on purpose, her work about purpose, and legacy creation, and what she's discovered about relationships along the way. We're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, Paula Jean and I are going to be taking you into our relationship trenches with some of our personal stories. And as always, we'll be giving you tips and tools that you can start using today. Paula Jean, what can our listeners do if they want to know more about you?
Sure. You certainly can reach out to my website, which is www.rockpapersistas.com. It's a nice landing spot where I have tools and resources and share in a very transparent way who I am, what my journey has been, and how I can be of service to others that are kind of in that muck and mire of life.
Cool. And they can shop there too, right?
Absolutely.
I love the shopping. All right, stay with us. We will be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Rekla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts, and we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. Because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter, we now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower Quiz. And as Neva Lee Rekla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world.
We're back. Today, we're getting some relationship advice from the trenches, part 1 of our 4-part relationship rescue series. I'm here with author, artist, and purpose guru, Paula Jean Burns. Okay, Paula, we left off talking about how bloody hard it is, especially for women, to receive. How did that come about in your life?
So as I had mentioned, usually our biggest trigger points or turnings, aroundings, if you will, come at a pain point. And I experienced a pain point in my early 50s with a very untimely death of my dad. who was very close and significant in my life and my family. He had just retired and decided that he was going to do all those things that you put on your someday list. Only he didn't have that opportunity because he died very quickly. And it caused me to pause hard and realize, holy crud, I have done the very thing that I'm witnessing through his life, is that I have been the professional plate spinner and given to everyone exceptionally. I'm a Virgo, so I like to plan and organize, and there's no better than me on your side.
Right on, sister. I'm a Virgo too. We've got that in common.
There you go. And I realized that someday is fake. It's false. It doesn't happen. If you don't do it now, if you don't address it now, it's not going to happen. So I had to take a step back and think, what am I doing here? And when I realized that I was living on default, kind of glossing over caring for others and not my own self, I realized that I had my cup was empty, basically. And it came to me through a message at my dad's wake, actually, when we were standing in the reception line with my mother and my sisters, and this person came through to me. I don't know who it was. If you believe in this, great, because I do. But if you don't, I had a message, and the message was that you can measure the depth and impact of someone by the length of their line. And I was like, what the heck is this message all about? And I asked my sisters, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's great. And, move along. 2 days later in my office, I was getting up, rushing to go to a meeting, multitasking like we all do. And the clarity of that message came through to me. And it was the people at your line at your funeral, obviously, people that you've had deep, rich, meaningful connections with will follow you in your life through your ups, your downs, the goods, the bads, to your end. And he had a beautiful, rich line. And I realized at that moment that other than my family, I probably had 3 other people in my entire life that I could say I had that kind of relationship with that might take the time and effort to come to my service. It wasn't any good for me. That was not going to happen. So I needed rescue, and I needed rescuing fast. So I took the deep dive into finding out why I didn't have relationships and peeling that onion. And I ended up coming up with a tool for myself, and I call it CPR for the soul. And I realized there were 3 things that were definitely lacking in my life. One was connection. I mean, deep, rich, meaningful relationships with people. Clarity of purpose. What am I supposed to be doing here? What's my value? What's my gift? And then creativity. If we don't nurture and tap into our creative side, which is where our gifts and talents are, then we're coming up short. So when I realized that those 3 buckets needed drastic attention is when the hard work, but the good work and the fun actually started. And that's when relationships started to come into my life. And when I realized at that time, oh my word, I am now engaged in my life, and I'm creating a legacy that I'm in love with.
So you started digging into your own life and to these really key components around connection and creativity and loving your life and owning who you are. How did you learn to go from being only a giver to being cool with asking for what you needed, and then to being cool with receiving it?
So, gotta love Rumi, because there's that quote again. I kept asking myself, when am I going to start working on me? What's my journey to myself? How do I get there? Who am I? What's my special purpose? What are my gifts and talents? And the only place you're going to find them, and trust me, because I went everywhere for them. You would ask anybody during that period of my life, I'm like, what's my special gift? What's my talent? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? Do you know? Do you see it? Oh, I can take a course. I can do this. I can get credentialed and do something else. I can move from my corporate job. I was asking everybody and everywhere, but it was all external. I needed to come back around to me. And when I started a meditation practice was when I started to begin to tap back into me and find that inner voice that had all the answers. and helped me get clarity to what my purpose is. And it's never done, and it's a journey, and it's a process, but I couldn't even find it to begin that process until I got quiet and still and went within.
I see that with so many of my clients, Paula Jean, where it's in finding the still moments and tapping into just a version of self-acceptance, of owning that once I'm even remotely, right? There's no finish line to this stuff. Anybody who says, oh, someday you'll fully love yourself and you'll fully, baloney, right? It is the human condition.
Calling you out.
Right? I'm calling you out on that. It's the human condition to constantly struggle with that little gremlin voice that says, uh-oh, I'm not good enough. And what if they find out? But we really can tap into a sense of alignment and a sense of our own purpose enough that voice becomes so much quieter. And what I've noticed is that when it is, and when we really own ourselves, how we're showing up in our lives, all of a sudden, it's easy to ask for what we need. It's easy to raise our hand and say, hey, I want some too. It's easy to say, I need something. I need you, rather than just giving, right? Because that's the thing, that owning of our worth that makes it possible for us to raise our hands. Absolutely. And start to receive.
Absolutely. And when that little voice becomes loud enough so you can hear it, see it, understand it, it is then our responsibility to take action on it. And this was a huge lesson for me because I'm a very concrete, sequential person. It was black or white. There is no gray. It's either right or wrong. There's no maybes. Mm-hmm. But when you start to listen to that voice and you can take action on it, which really is our intuition, our knowing, and when you can trust that enough to take action, even when it makes absolutely no sense to the people that are closest to you or the situation you're in. The example that I can give you is back in 2008 when we know the economy was near depression state. This is when my awakening came, and I chose to walk away from a 6-figure corporate career. My husband's self-employed, so it made no sense to anybody. I was the one with the 401k, the benefits, the whole 9 yards, keeping the family going. And I'm like, nope, this is not supposed to be where I'm supposed to be. And people looked at me like I had 4 heads, like, you're crazy. You're having a midlife crisis. Just go get a few some medication, Ativan, which we ended up calling Atagirls at the time, and you'll be good to go. And I'm like, I don't think that's the plan. But when I listened to the voice and took action on it, I promise you I'm not unique in this. The safety net will appear. It does appear. And that next step is revealed. And it's in doing that the journey that you call life is delicious, juicy, magical, unbelievable. It's where the legacy starts to get created. And those relationships that form around that kind of action are magical.
Yeah, they absolutely are. So I want us to dish a little bit here for a minute, because we've both done a lot of this work and we do this work with other people. As we grow and change, the people around us, first of all, nobody likes change, right? We're wired to not like change, right? Our brains say, emergency, emergency, something is unfamiliar here, right? So even the people who love us best, who want the most for us, tend to put on the brakes when they see us changing. And that affects a lot of our relationships. On the flip side, even those of us who might consider ourselves woke, in my daughter's language, right, who have kind of started to dive into these sorts of things, are not immune, right? So I want to talk a little bit about teenagers. We've both got them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And here we are, right? Here we are talking about this journey of how to own ourselves and that sense of self and how that plays into living a whole, purposeful, meaningful life. And yet, as moms, I know both you and I have struggled with watching our teenagers navigate the world that way. And the instinct initially is to put on the brakes for them, right? Whoa, they're a big fella. Those are not the rules.
Yeah.
And so what are some of your struggles and solutions that you found in raising teens?
Yeah, well, I think I have more struggles than I have solutions, to tell you the truth. I always remember actions speak louder than words. Words can hurt, and words can be smoothed over. They can be made whole again. But your actions really dictate a value, a lifestyle. And I think for me, when my kids saw me go from being that very, I guess I'll say rigid, in the sense that I was so highly organized, and honest to God, if you could see, I would take out the notebook that I have at the house from when the kids were little, and the name on the binder is called The Burns Book of Things You Need to Know. And in there is everything that you would need to know to be a Burns and to live in this house. Schedules, doctors, calendars for kids for school, including, and I'm not even kidding you, I had a spreadsheet for how to plan and organize Christmas, what days things got done. And the big joke in the family is I would set the dining room table 3, 4, maybe 5 days ahead of the day of Christmas so that I could have it organized and done. And they're like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Maybe I was, but that was the way I could cope and live. When they saw me move away from the binder, away from being so organized and rigid, and more to maybe gray is okay, maybe it doesn't have to be yes or no, maybe it could be a maybe, is when I started to see the shift or the softening in our family dynamic and our relationships, that because I was so rigid and organized, it looked like I had all the answers. And I really didn't. I was just trying to survive. Yeah. So when they saw that I wasn't so, if you will, perfect or right or organized all the time, it allowed them the freedom to kind of be that way too. And we had much better conversation than we did otherwise.
I love that. I love that. It's another example of showing up, right? How you were showing up every day was so out of alignment with who you were as a mom and as a person. And what your kids were seeing was this really uptight, organized, everything has to be perfect person. And I mean, you're about as perfect as anybody I've ever met, Paula, but nobody's perfect.
Nobody is. And the funny
and what a horrible thing to have to live up to.
Yeah. And you don't really know it because, and somebody just said this to me most recently, if you can look at the emotion behind the action, you'll understand better where the person's coming from. So my actions were crazy, but my emotion was out of love because I love them so much and I wanted it to be so special or so right. When I start to think about it that way, I'm like, I love you so much, I'm going to be cuckoo.
You know, I'm glad you bring that up because I think that is at the heart of the problems, the challenges that we create in all of our relationships, right? We love them so much and we want it to be good for them and we want it to be right. And we move into like fixing mode. You know, I remember when my son first of all, I made that kid crazy. When he was really little, I so wanted him to understand and get the big picture and not feel trapped by the rules and regulations of life and to think for himself and all of these things that this 4 or 5-year-old kid, granted he was a really smart kid, but I would just talk to him about everything and try to explain everything. And one day Max said to me, I think he was about 5 years old, "Mom, someday you are going to write a book and you're going to title it The Book of Really Long Explanations." Right? Because because I was constantly so fearful that he might miss something or I might miss an opportunity to get it right with him, that I spent all of my time explaining to him. And as he grew into a teenager, I think both my husband and I fell into this horrible trap, this fear trap of trying to fix things for him.
Yeah.
So if he was unhappy, when he played video games too much, if he stayed up all night, whatever it was, we think, this is going to lead to such and such, and it's our job to teach him this thing. And while we were trying so hard, and I think we thought that we were being such wonderful parents, we were actually talking at him. Right? Just the way he was when he was a little kid and I was explaining things. When we were, okay, Max, it's really not healthy for you to stay up and play video games all night, even on a Saturday night, because you don't catch up on sleep and blah, 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 blah. And we thought we're being so open-minded. We're not telling him he can't do that. We're having a conversation with the boy. Right? We're telling him, we're giving him all of the information so he can make his own choices.
Yeah. And meanwhile, all he hears is
wah, wah, wah. Right? We were talking at that kid, and the more we did, the more we loved him with our talk, the farther he moved away from us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, I don't even remember what the thing was that hit me over the head that made me realize, oh my God, I do this for a living. I'm good at this in every other part of my life. And here I am talking at my kid, thinking that that's helpful to him because I love him so much. And as I started to dial it back, as I started to just stop talking, sometimes I'd sit in his room and not say anything, and he'd tell me, Mom, you're weird, get out of here. I was like, well, I'm just interested in what you're doing. What's that video game about? What's whatever. The more times that I did that, the more he started to actually talk to me. And the more this kid actually started to talk to us, the more we discovered that most of the things we were worried about didn't even exist in his real life.
Yeah.
So our fear puts us into fixing mode, whether it's with a binder or with conversation, and we want to make it right for them when in fact we're not listening. So stepping back and listening to people in relationships, really seeing them, hearing them in that same way we are trying to learn to do for ourselves is critical to any of our relationships being healthy.
It is. It's critical, and it's a skill set that we don't incorporate in a bold enough, strong enough way as we become adults and then move into parenthood, if that's the path and journey that we go on. Because to sit and to listen feels like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give enough, and there's some expectation that because you're the parent, you know it all, you've seen it all, you've done it all. There is wisdom, and wisdom has a value and it has a place. But our little cherubs that come to this world bring a whole lot of wisdom and clarity and creativity that we somehow kind of water down and remove at some point. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And reestablish that and build it up. And it's a journey for all of us, whether they're 4, 12, 27, it's a journey.
Yeah. Overall, I find with the people that I coach and across the board for all of us, right? Our greatest challenge is also our biggest weakness. And where we're really strong in one part of our life, we're really weak in another, right? And that is, I think, dependent on what we feel about ourselves in that space, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were always an academic and you did great at school, you might have no problem showing up fully, whether you fail tests, succeed on tests, you just keep going. It worked. Your identity says, I'm an academic. I'm strong here. I can navigate this world without fear. And yet that very same person who is also incredibly creative, maybe an artist, who hasn't had that same, doesn't have that same self-worth, self-image with their art, won't put their art out there, is so terrified of being viewed as not good enough in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when we're raising kids, and quite frankly, when we're having any kind of intimate relationships, the more we can offer the people around us an opportunity to see themselves as whole, to see themselves as capable, to see themselves as worthy, as bright and sparkly, right? The more we can allow people to see that reflection of them in their eyes, in our eyes, the stronger they become.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, the stronger our relationships become.
Yep. And it goes back to sort of the 3 C's that I talked about, what we need in terms of CPR for the soul to bring this all back together as an adult. Because we have it when we're children. Goes back to those 3 C's. It's the connection to each other in a whole way. It's clarity of intention. I'm here at this moment in time for you and with you. It's a 2-way street. We're eyeball to eyeball. There's a visceral feeling between us, whether it's for a minute or whatever, longer. And then the creativity, we all have it. That's what we want to highlight and shine. Whether you speak well, whether you're a singer, whether you have a talent with connecting with people and telling a joke, making someone feel comfortable, whether you're a musician, it doesn't matter. We've taken those gifts and kind of said, well, those are secondary because you're primary of who you are. And the label that I've put on you is how I'm going to see you in this world, because that's concrete and I can figure it out. Oh, you're a teacher. Oh, you're a business person. You're a sports person. Those are labels that we have identified with your worth and your value. And when we don't like that label anymore, or we can't live up to the expectation of it, is when we start to fall apart.
It's so true. So much of our relationships are based on how we view the specific roles, right? We all have this rule book in our minds that says, and we're not even aware of it all the time.
No.
A good husband does this.
Yep.
A good wife does this. A good son, a good daughter, a good boss, a good colleague, and a bad one does this, this, and this. Only every single one of us is playing with a slightly different rule book.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the people we're in relationship with don't meet the expectations of the role that we've set for them, there's conflict. And there's so much confusion because we all think that we're doing the right thing, that this is the good and right way to be. Why can't you just be this way?
Absolutely. I have such a sweet little story around this. So I opened up this shop 2 years ago. We started out as a pop-up shop, my mother and I fell madly in love with the whole idea and the concept. Part and parcel, a big part of it, was because it was focused on creating connections to the people that walked into the shop, to my community, to the other artisans. And I had this lovely little old lady that was one of the first folks that came into the shop. Her name is Bet. She's sharp as a tack, cute as buttons. And she would come in and we'd have conversation. I'd give her a hug when she left. And then she'd come in like the week and a half later, and she'd buy little things here and there, and sometimes not. But she constantly keeps coming in. And a week ago she was in. I'm like, Bet, I've missed you. You haven't been in. She's like, I know, we were away, and then I wasn't feeling well, but I'm so glad to be back here because I need to get the thing I need from here. And I'm thinking she's talking about an item that I have at the store. We have these glazed nuts and she loves them. I'm like, oh, I'll get you the bag. She said, no, I'm here for your hug. I love your hugs. It makes me feel so good when I leave the store. Well, of course, the waterworks came on. I'm like, oh my God. It's my example. That's a little gift that I have. It's my way of creating that connection with someone to give a good darn old hug and mean it. And that's the very thing she was coming to my store for.
Yeah. Right. Because you saw her when she came in.
Yep.
You know, you saw her, and yet the people that we're closest to are sometimes the ones we see the least. Right? We hug the little old lady who comes into our store because we have the space around that, the mental space to just see them. And yet our kids, our spouse, our best friend gets clogged up in our everyday living and the rules that we have around roles, and we miss out on seeing them.
We do.
We miss the chance to see them that way, just to lean in for a hug for the hell of it.
Absolutely. And a piece of that for me was partly because I thought, well, they're here. I can get it anytime. You know, they're around, right? Until they're not. And then you realize, oh, those 18 years just went by. I think I need to reach out in a different way. I'm yearning for that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
and those are the seeds. Those are the actions that over time create a legacy that is the thing you will take with you and the very thing that will keep you here and live on.
That's so true. It's so true. I think that I have never met a person, and I work with hundreds of people every year, never met a person who ultimately didn't want to be seen, heard, and understood. Right? We want to be respected. We want to be loved. We're communal creatures. And yet, it's so hard for us to flip that. So in order to be seen, you've got to see other people as whole, right? In order to be really heard, to be understood for who you are, you have to be willing to look deeply at the person across from you with just curiosity, no judgment, no rules, and wonder, what about you makes you tick, right? To do your best to understand them, right? And you only can do that by asking, by engaging in conversation, right?
Absolutely. And be willing to keep the space, as we say, hold the space during that time for the vulnerability of that interaction. That was something I had to relearn. It was easier for me to keep an arm's length in a relationship, not because I didn't care, not because I wasn't interested, because I was afraid to show and feel my own vulnerability, even if it was a loving, intimate, emotional relationship with a spouse or my family members. A little easier to do it with coworkers, but it's two sides of a coin. Holding that space and seeing and validating the person you're with and allowing yourself the same.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm going to ask you one more question, my friend. In light of all the groovy things we talked about so far today, if you met the 25-year-old Paula Jean on the street in front of your shop later this afternoon, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that you are whole and love yourself enough to trust that inner voice and be open and vulnerable in sharing that voice with others.
Yeah. Vulnerability is our superpower, right? By sharing your vulnerability, you allow other people to do the same, right? We really have the chance to tap in fully.
And you have no idea, by sharing your vulnerability, your story, your situation, whatever the case may be, you don't know how that's going to land to the very person that needs to hear that, because they're going through something and they need your wisdom, your experience, your words to heal the situation they're in. And when we break that and we fail to do that, then we start isolating ourselves. We start separating from that connection that we crave to thrive.
So true.
And it's not perfect, and it's a journey, and you'll never get it all done, and you'll never get it all right. I haven't, you won't, and it's all okay.
Right on. There is no finish line.
Nope.
There is no finish line, but we just get better and better as we grow.
Absolutely.
All right, Paula, can you remind us where folks can find out more about you?
Absolutely. I'm located on the iconic Guilford Green here in Connecticut. So if you're local, please come in for one of those hugs and a hello. If you want to check it out virtually and connect with me, I'd love that. I'm an open book. I'll share anything and everything that I've got in terms of wisdom and creativity and good ideas at the store, which is www.rockpapersistas.com.
Okay, and just for our listeners, it's Sistas, no R on the end of that.
That's right, SISTAS. We are sassy and we are
Okay, listeners, I've got a tool for you. This is my absolute favorite tool for making all of your relationships a little bit easier. It's insanely simple. Flip the fix. Okay? We are always wired to want to fix things. Our brains are problem solvers. When you see a problem in a relationship, or when you perceive that someone that you care about is struggling or having a problem, your instinct is to fix it. And when we try to fix somebody else's problem or somebody else, it instantly puts distance in the relationship. It instantly adds armor to that other person. Okay? So the simplest thing for you to do, because the thing that comes up in our head is, okay, but wait a minute. What if I really can help? What if what I'm offering actually is useful? It might be. And the way that you'll know is if you flip it. So if you're about to reach out to a child or a teenager or your best friend or your partner with some handy advice or something that they can do to fix what's going on in their life, flip it and see if you were the one with that issue and they came along and offered you exactly what you're about to offer them, how would you feel? If it would truly make you feel excited, closer to them, energized, give you some insight, if that's what your gut tells you, go ahead and offer. But most of the time, what you'll discover is it will make you feel small. It will make you feel judged. It will make you feel like they think you can't do it on your own. And if that's your gut instinct, then the best thing to do is simply ask a question. Hey, you seem like you're struggling. Can I help? So moving forward, flip the fix. Simple, easy little way that you can make all of your relationships better. You can access this tool and all of the tools that we discuss here on the show by going to aglimpseinside.superpowerexperts.com. Now, there's no www in that. All of these tools can be accessed on the show pages at aglimpseinside.superpowerexperts.com. And on that page, you'll also find a little button where you can reach out to me directly and tell me your story. I'd love to hear from you. I want to thank my pal Paula Jean for digging in with us today, and thanks to all of you for listening in. Next up on our Relationship Rescue series, I'll be coaching Megan, who really wants to find a loving relationship in her life. I hope you'll join us. Until then, big love.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz today.